Imagine you are standing in a crowded room, surrounded by the hum of voices and the scent of expensive perfume, yet your eyes are irresistibly drawn to a single person who isn't even trying to be noticed. You've felt this pull before, that inexplicable magnetic tug towards someone who seems to possess a secret frequency the rest of us cannot hear. We are taught from childhood that to be loved is to be kind, to be present, and to be available. Yet the harshest truth of human psychology is that the people we become most obsessed with are often those who offer us the least. This chapter is not about the polite rules of social etiquette. It is about the raw, primal mechanics of the human brain and why it chooses to hyper-focus on specific individuals while discarding others like background noise. Obsession is not a lightning bolt that strikes at random. It is a meticulously constructed psychological state triggered by specific behavioral cues that bypass the logical mind and strike directly at the limbic system. Why does one person's text message make your heart race after 3 days of silence, while another person's consistent devotion feels like a chore to acknowledge? The answer lies in the devastating power of emotional scarcity and the way our brains are hardwired to equate difficulty with value. By the time we finish this exploration, you will realize that the people you have pined for were not necessarily superior to you. They simply understood, perhaps even unconsciously, how to manipulate the invisible currency of attention. We are entering a world where effort is often the enemy of attraction, and where the most sought-after individuals are those who have mastered the art of being a mystery that needs to be solved. Prepare to look at your social interactions through a cold, clinical lens that strips away the romanticism to reveal the gears of obsession turning beneath the surface. The core of this phenomenon begins with the dopamine response, a neurotransmitter that thrives not on the reward itself, but on the agonizingly beautiful anticipation of that reward. When someone is consistently kind and predictable, your brain quickly maps their behavior and files them away as a solved puzzle, effectively killing any long-term intrigue or chemical spikes. However, when you encounter an individual who is unpredictable, someone who offers warmth one moment and a cool, detached distance the next, you trigger what psychologists call an intermittent reinforcement schedule. This is the exact same mechanism that keeps a gambler glued to a slot machine even as they lose their savings. The brain becomes addicted to the possibility of the win rather than the win itself. In this state of uncertainty, the target of your affection becomes the sole source of your emotional regulation, and your mind begins to loop their image in a desperate attempt to find a pattern where none exists. This is how a person becomes an obsession. They stop being a human being and start being a puzzle that your ego refuses to leave unfinished. We mistake this mental looping for deep love or a soulmate connection, but in reality, it is simply your brain under the influence of a chemical storm designed to keep you pursuing a scarce resource. The most magnetic people in the world are those who understand that to be always available is to be valueless. They occupy the space between presence and absence, creating a vacuum that the observer feels an instinctive, almost frantic need to fill. They do not beg for your attention. They make you work for theirs, and in that labor, you convince yourself that they must be worth the effort. It is a subtle, lethal shift in power that turns a casual acquaintance into a permanent resident of your thoughts, and it happens without you ever realizing the trap was being set. Perceived value is a grand illusion fueled by the signals of confidence that an individual projects into the social ether long before they ever speak a word. We are social animals who look to others to determine how we should value a person, and nothing signals high value more effectively than a perceived lack of neediness. When you see someone who is perfectly content in their own solitude, who does not scan the room for approval or adjust their posture to fit the expectations of others, your brain registers a signal of immense social power. This is the psychology of the high-status individual who does not compete because they are the prize everyone else is competing for. Most people approach social situations with a quiet desperation to be liked, and this energy acts as a repellent, signaling to the subconscious minds of others that you are a common resource. True obsession, however, is reserved for the rare resource, the person who seems to have an internal world so rich and satisfying that they don't actually need you to participate in it. This creates a fascinating paradox. The less you appear to need the validation of others, the more they are driven to give it to you in an attempt to prove their own worthiness in your eyes. This is why the person who tries the hardest often fails the most spectacularly, while the person who remains slightly aloof gathers a following of devoted admirers. It is an emotional arms race where the one who cares the least holds the most leverage, and the one who is most comfortable with the idea of losing you is the one you are most terrified of losing. By projecting an aura of self-sufficiency, these individuals force you to audition for a role in their lives, turning the social hierarchy upside down until you are the one seeking their approval. To truly understand why the brain latches on certain personalities, we must examine the concept of emotional contrast, which functions like a spotlight in a dark room. Most human interactions are lukewarm, a steady stream of polite pleasantries and predictable responses that blend into a gray blur of social compliance. An individual who can generate high-intensity emotional contrast, moments of extreme intensity followed by periods of profound calm, creates a sensory experience that the brain finds impossible to ignore. Think of the relationship that felt like a roller coaster. The friend who was your fiercest defender one day and a distant stranger the next, or the boss whose rare praise felt like winning an Olympic gold medal. This variance creates a heightened state of awareness where your nervous system is constantly scanning for the next peak, making the person responsible for those peaks the center of your universe. When we are around someone who is too nice, our emotional baseline remains flat, and we eventually become bored and restless. But the person who challenges us, who pushes our boundaries and then pulls us into a warm embrace, creates a jagged emotional landscape that keeps us hyper-alert and deeply invested. This is not about being cruel. It is about the strategic use of tension and release. Without tension, there is no release, and without release, there is no relief. The most captivating people are masters of this rhythm, knowing exactly when to create a moment of friction and when to offer the soothing balm of their attention. They turn human interaction into a narrative with high stakes and unpredictable plot twists, and the human mind is a narrative-seeking machine that cannot look away from a story that hasn't reached its conclusion. You don't obsess over the person who makes you feel safe. You obsess over the person who makes you feel alive, even if that aliveness comes with a side of anxiety. Confidence is often misunderstood as being the loudest person in the room or having the most accomplishments, but true magnetic confidence is actually a form of emotional stillness. It is the ability to hold a gaze a second longer than is comfortable, to allow a silence to hang in the air without rushing to fill it, and to move through the world with a deliberate, unhurried grace. These are confidence signals that communicate a deep-seated belief in one's own reality, and they are incredibly intoxicating to those who are constantly questioning their own place in the world. When you encounter someone with this level of internal certainty, you instinctively want to merge your reality with theirs, to bask in the glow of someone who seems to know exactly who they are. This is why we see people with average looks or modest backgrounds commanding the absolute devotion of everyone around them. They have mastered the nonverbal language of entitlement. Not the arrogant entitlement of the weak, but the calm entitlement of the strong who assume they belong in every room they enter. This signal bypasses the filters of logic and speaks directly to the evolutionary part of our brain that seeks out leaders and protectors. We gravitate toward these individuals because their certainty acts as an anchor for our own insecurities, and we become obsessed with them because they represent a version of ourselves we wish we had the courage to inhabit. They become a mirror reflecting our potential, and we find ourselves constantly seeking their presence just to feel that reflected power once again. It is a psychological tether that is forged in the fires of self-assuredness, and once it is locked into place, it is nearly impossible to break without a total collapse of the observer's ego. The element of unpredictability is perhaps the most dangerous tool in the arsenal of the obsessed-over individual, as it weaponizes the human imagination against itself. When a person's behavior does not follow a linear path, the brain is forced to dedicate massive amounts of processing power to analyze and predict their next move. This mental labor is the foundation of obsession. The more you think about someone, the more important they become to you, regardless of whether those thoughts are positive or negative. In the silence of their absence, you replay every conversation, dissect every look, and invent 1,000 different scenarios to explain their behavior, effectively building a cathedral of their image in your mind. By the time you see them again, you aren't interacting with a real human being. You are interacting with the monumental version of them you've created during your hours of rumination. This is the secret of the elusive personality, the one who doesn't post every meal on social media, who doesn't explain their every move, and who leaves you wondering where they go when they aren't with you. They understand that information is the enemy of mystery, and mystery is the fuel of obsession. In a world of total transparency and oversharing, the person who keeps their cards close to their chest becomes a fascinating anomaly that everyone wants to uncover. They create a curiosity gap that the human brain feels a physical compulsion to close, and in the process of trying to close that gap, you end up falling deeper into their gravity. You find yourself checking your phone for a notification that may never come, or analyzing a 3-word sentence for hidden meanings, all because they refuse to give you the clarity you so desperately crave. They have mastered the art of being a ghost who haunts your waking hours, a phantom that you cannot banish because you are the one who invited them in. Relatable scenarios of this psychological warfare play out every day in the most mundane settings, from the office water cooler to the high-stakes world of modern dating. Consider the friend who always seems to have a more interesting plan, who cancels at the last minute but does so with such effortless charm that you find yourself apologizing to them. Or the romantic partner who makes you feel like the center of the universe for one weekend, only to become a busy, distracted shadow of themselves the following Monday. We see these patterns and we feel the sting of the hook, yet we find ourselves leaning in closer rather than pulling away. This is because the emotional lows created by their withdrawal serve to amplify the highs of their return, creating a cycle of addiction that mirrors the effects of powerful narcotics. We become hunters in our own lives, stalking the high of their validation, and we lose sight of our own value in the pursuit of theirs. This dynamic is not limited to romantic attraction. It exists in friendships where one person is clearly the leader and others vie for their favor, and in professional environments where a charismatic mentor keeps their subordinates in a state of perpetual performance through the strategic use of approval. It is a universal human dance where the steps are dictated by the one who is willing to walk away from the floor. Understanding these patterns is the first step toward reclaiming your own power, but it also reveals a haunting truth about the nature of human connection. We do not want what is easy. We want what is earned, and we value what we fear we might lose. The tragedy of the nice individual is that they provide too much security, and in doing so, they inadvertently switch off the very mechanisms that lead to deep, obsessive attraction. As we conclude this first step into the architecture of the human heart, you must confront a realization that may feel both liberating and deeply unsettling. How have you been seen by the world until this moment? Have you been the reliable one, the predictable person whose presence is taken for granted because your loyalty was never in question? Have you been the one pouring effort into the void, only to wonder why your intensity seems to drive people further away instead of drawing them in? The truth is that by trying to be everything to everyone, you may have made yourself invisible, a constant background radiation that provides warmth but no light. You have likely been operating under the false assumption that people value you for what you give them, when in reality, people value you for how you make them feel about themselves in your presence. If you provide a constant, unwavering mirror of approval, they have no reason to strive, no reason to wonder, and no reason to obsess. The shift in awareness you are experiencing now is the beginning of a transformation from the one who watches to the one who is watched. You are starting to see that your availability was your weakness and your transparency was your downfall. As you reflect on the faces of those who have held power over you, you will see the patterns of scarcity and unpredictability they used, perhaps even by accident, to capture your mind. Now, the question remains, are you ready to stop being the one who is captivated and start being the one who holds the key to the obsession of others? The mirror is turning, and for the first time, you are starting to see the true potential of your own shadow. This is the end of your invisibility. The world is about to start looking, and this time, they won't be able to turn away. The concept of attraction is often dismissed as a surface-level reaction to physical beauty or a stroke of genetic luck, but the reality is far more intricate and hidden within the ancient architecture of the brain. While a pleasing aesthetic might open a door, it is the invisible undercurrent of emotional influence that determines who stays in the room and who is forgotten the moment they leave. To win hearts like a professional, you must first accept that attraction is not a visual event, but a neurological one, governed by a complex system of triggers that operate entirely below the threshold of conscious thought. We often find ourselves drawn to people for reasons we cannot articulate, describing it as a vibe or a spark, but these are simply placeholders for a series of successful psychological handshakes. At the core of this interaction is the concept of familiarity bias, a survival mechanism where the brain instinctively trusts what it recognizes. We are hardwired to feel safe around patterns that mirror our existing world, and the most influential individuals are those who can subtly weave themselves into the familiar fabric of another person's psyche. By the time you finish this chapter, you will understand that the feeling of a soulmate connection is rarely about destiny and almost always about the expert alignment of emotional frequencies. Attraction is the art of becoming a psychological mirror, reflecting back to the other person the most idealized version of their own internal reality. It is a game of resonance, where the goal is not to impress the other person with your own brilliance, but to make them feel brilliant in your presence. When you shift your focus from being interesting to being interested, you begin to tap into a power that can bypass any physical limitation or social barrier, turning a stranger into a devoted follower through the sheer force of emotional synchronicity. At the heart of every deep connection lies a biological phenomenon known as mirror neurons, the specialized cells in our brains that allow us to literally feel what another person is experiencing. This is the foundation of empathy and the secret engine of emotional influence, acting as a bridge between two separate nervous systems. When you interact with someone, your brains are engaged in a silent, high-speed conversation that happens long before your first sentence is finished. If you approach a person with an undercurrent of anxiety or a hidden agenda, their mirror neurons will pick up on those subtle micro-expressions and internal tensions, triggering a sense of unease that they will likely misinterpret as a dislike for you personally. Conversely, if you carry an aura of genuine warmth and grounded presence, you effectively force their brain to simulate that same state of calm. This is why emotional states are notoriously contagious. We are constantly leaking our internal energy into the environment around us, shaping the moods of everyone we touch. The most magnetic individuals in any social hierarchy are those who have mastered the regulation of their own emotional state, ensuring that they are the source of the high that others want to catch. They do not wait for the room to provide the energy. They bring the energy and watch as the room inevitably synchronizes with them. This is not about toxic positivity or faking a smile. It is about the deliberate cultivation of an internal landscape so compelling that others cannot help but want to inhabit it. When you understand that you are essentially an emotional broadcaster, you realize that your presence alone is a tool of influence, capable of lowering a person's defenses and opening their heart without you ever having to say a single word of persuasion. The illusion of connection is often built upon the scaffolding of emotional resonance, a state where two people feel as though they are moving in perfect harmony. This feeling is frequently mistaken for a deep compatibility of values or character, but it is often the result of subtle behavioral mirroring and pacing. When we meet someone who matches our speech rate, adopts a similar posture, or uses the same vocabulary, our brains receive a signal that this person is like us, which triggers an immediate release of oxytocin, the chemical of trust. This subconscious bonding happens in a vacuum of logic. You might find yourself trusting a stranger with your deepest secrets simply because their physical presence felt harmonious with your own. This is how attraction grows in the absence of reason, fueled by the brain's desperate need to find patterns and belonging. Think of the last time you met someone and felt an instant rapport, a sense that you had known them for years despite only just meeting. In all likelihood, that individual was either naturally or intentionally practicing high-level emotional alignment, absorbing your energy and reflecting it back to you in a way that felt safe and validating. This creates a powerful feedback loop where the more you feel understood, the more you are attracted to the person providing that understanding. It is a seductive trap because we are all, at our core, deeply lonely and searching for a witness to our existence. The person who can provide that witness, even if it is a psychological construct, becomes an indispensable part of our emotional world. They aren't just a person anymore. They are the key to a door we didn't even know was locked, and our attraction to them is the sound of that lock clicking open. People are influenced far more by how you make them feel about themselves than by any specific fact you share or story you tell. You could be the most accomplished person in your field, but if your presence makes others feel small, ignored, or judged, they will instinctively withdraw from you, regardless of your status. True emotional influence is the ability to create a safe harbor in the midst of social noise, a space where the other person feels seen, heard, and significant. This is why some individuals can enter a room and immediately command the attention of everyone present. They aren't just taking up space, they are giving out significance. They use their tone, their eye contact, and their active listening to create an emotional vacuum that draws others in. We often focus on what we should say to be liked, memorizing jokes or impressive anecdotes, but the words are merely the vehicle for the feeling. A simple hello delivered with a deep, resonant warmth can do more for attraction than a 20-minute monologue on your personal successes. When you make someone feel like they are the only person in the world, you are performing a form of psychological surgery, bypassing their ego and speaking directly to their need for validation. This creates a bond that is incredibly difficult to break because it is rooted in the most fundamental human desire, to be valued. In social interactions, friendships, and even the early stages of romantic dynamics, the person who provides the most consistent and high-quality emotional validation is the one who will inevitably win the heart. It is a simple equation of emotional economics, where the person who gives the most feeling earns the most loyalty. The spread of emotional states between individuals is a phenomenon known as emotional contagion, and it serves as the invisible thread that ties social groups together. Imagine a close friendship where one person is perpetually cynical and the other is an optimist. Over time, their emotional baselines will move toward one another until they reach a state of equilibrium. In any interaction, the person with the most stable and intense emotional state will always act as the anchor, dragging the other person's mood toward their own. This is why being around a highly charismatic person feels like a drug. Their energy is so potent and well-defined that your own nervous system has no choice but to surrender to it. They shape your perception of the world simply by existing in it with you, turning a boring evening into an adventure or a stressful situation into a manageable task. This influence is not limited to face-to-face meetings. It extends to digital communication, where tone and presence are conveyed through the rhythm of text and the choice of language. When you learn to shape your emotional output intentionally, you stop being a victim of the atmosphere and start being the one who creates it. You realize that your energy is a signature, a unique psychological thumbprint that people recognize and crave. By choosing to project a specific state, whether it is one of mystery, excitement, or profound peace, you are essentially setting the thermostat for every relationship in your life. This is the point where attraction stops being a mystery and starts being a craft, a deliberate application of psychological principles that can be tuned and refined to achieve a specific outcome. In many social and romantic dynamics, we see attraction blooming in environments that seem completely illogical. Why does someone stay attracted to a person who is technically wrong for them on paper while ignoring a perfect match? The answer is that the heart does not speak the language of spreadsheets or logic. It speaks the language of emotional peaks and valleys. A relationship that is purely logical is often devoid of the emotional contrast required to keep the brain's attention. We are drawn to people who can provoke a reaction in us, who can challenge us and then soothe us, creating a dynamic tension that the brain finds addictive. This is the hidden architecture of influence, the ability to move a person through a range of feelings, from curiosity to excitement to comfort. When attraction grows without logical reason, it is because the emotional narrative is so compelling that the logical mind simply gives up and goes along for the ride. We see this in the friend who is always there for us, providing a steady stream of emotional reliability that eventually turns into a deep, unshakable bond. We see it in the romantic interest who keeps us guessing, triggering a cycle of pursuit and reward that feels more like a game than a partnership. In every case, the attraction is a response to the emotional stimulation being provided. The key to winning hearts is not to be perfect, but to be emotionally evocative. If you can make someone feel a variety of intense, positive emotions, they will naturally conclude that you are a vital part of their happiness, even if they can't explain why. As you begin to see attraction through this clinical yet immersive lens, the world starts to look very different. You realize that the popular kids in school or the charismatic leaders in business weren't just lucky. They were unintentionally triggering the very systems we are discussing. They were the ones whose mirror neurons were firing in high definition, whose energy was the most contagious, and whose presence provided the most potent emotional resonance. Once you peel back the curtain, you see that every successful social interaction follows a predictable pattern of emotional exchange. By understanding these systems, you gain the ability to intentionally shape the way you are perceived, moving from a passive participant to an active architect of your social life. You can choose to trigger familiarity when you want to build trust, or you can introduce unpredictability when you want to spark obsession. You can use your presence to calm a chaotic situation or your energy to ignite a dull one. This is the realization that separates the amateurs from the pros. Attraction is not a random lightning strike that you have to wait for. It is a psychological system that can be studied, practiced, and mastered. The spark you feel when you meet someone special is not a mystery of the universe. It is the sound of your brain's ancient software running a perfect program. When you know how the software works, you can write your own code. This awareness marks a profound shift in your personal evolution, moving you away from the frustration of being misunderstood and toward the clarity of intentional influence. You are no longer wondering why some people like you and others don't. You are looking at the data of your interactions and seeing exactly which emotional triggers were hit and which were missed. You are starting to see that every heart has a different lock, but all those locks are built from the same psychological materials. Whether it is a professional relationship, a deep friendship, or a romantic pursuit, the underlying mechanics remain the same. It is about feeling, not facts. It is about the subconscious, not the conscious. It is about the mirror, not the image. As you step into this new understanding, you will find that people are more than willing to give you their hearts if you simply show them that you know how to handle them. You are becoming a master of the invisible strings that connect us all, a conductor of the human orchestra. This is not about manipulation in the dark sense. It is about the mastery of connection in the highest sense. You are learning to speak the silent language of the soul, and for the first time, you are realizing that everyone is waiting for someone like you to come along and speak it. The random events of your past are being replaced by the strategic successes of your future as you finally accept the truth that attraction is a system, and you are finally learning how to run it. Deep connection is often misunderstood as a grand architectural feat, something that requires a massive blueprint of shared history or a dramatic display of loyalty to maintain its structure. In reality, the bridge between two souls is built from the most delicate of materials, woven together through the silent language of shared vulnerability and the precise timing of emotional openness. We tend to believe that to make someone love or trust us, we must present ourselves as a flawless monument of success, an untouchable figure of strength and competence. However, the paradox of the human heart is that we are never truly drawn to perfection. We are drawn to the cracks in the armor where the light of a shared struggle can shine through. True bonding occurs in the moments when you lower your guard just enough to allow another person to see their own insecurities reflected in your eyes. This is not about a reckless dumping of your darkest secrets, but rather a strategic and gentle peeling back of the layers that shield your humanity. It is the subtle art of saying, "I am like you. I feel what you feel, and in this space, it is safe for us both to exist without the weight of our masks." When you offer a glimpse into your true self, you are not just sharing information. You are extending an invitation for the other person to come out of hiding. This creates a powerful shift in the social dynamic, moving the interaction from a superficial exchange of pleasantries to a sacred ground of mutual recognition. Connection is the byproduct of feeling understood, not being impressed. And the moment you prioritize your relatability over your status, you begin to tap into a reservoir of influence that most people will never discover because they are too busy trying to be seen as superior rather than being seen as human. The foundation of any lasting bond is the creation of psychological safety, a state in which the other person feels that their thoughts and emotions can be expressed without the threat of judgment or dismissal. This is achieved through the profound and often underrated skill of emotional validation, which is the act of recognizing and accepting someone's internal experience as being legitimate and real. In our modern world, we are often so eager to fix problems or offer advice that we bypass the most important step of human interaction, which is simply to acknowledge the weight of what the other person is carrying. When someone tells you they are struggling, they are rarely looking for a solution. They are looking for a witness. By saying, "I can see why that would be difficult for you," or "that sounds incredibly heavy," you are providing a psychological anchor that allows them to stop drifting in their own uncertainty. This process of validation creates a deep, subconscious sense of trust that acts as the glue for all future interactions. In a workplace dynamic, this might look like a manager who listens to a frustrated employee without immediately defending the company policy, choosing instead to honor the employee's frustration first. In a friendship, it is the person who sits in the silence of a tragedy rather than trying to fill the room with hollow platitudes. This behavioral mirroring of another's emotional state sends a powerful signal to their nervous system that you are an ally, not a threat. By creating this sanctuary of safety, you become a rare and precious resource in their life, a person they will naturally gravitate toward whenever they need to feel grounded. You aren't just a friend or a colleague anymore. You are a sanctuary, and the attachment that grows from that feeling of safety is stronger than any bond forged in the fires of common interest or physical proximity. Active listening is perhaps the most misidentified skill in the human toolkit, often reduced to the act of staying quiet until it is your turn to speak. Real listening, however, is an act of total presence, a form of meditation where your entire focus is placed on the nuances of the other person's tone, the pauses in their speech, and the unspoken subtext of their gestures. It is a generous giving of your attention that makes the other person feel as though they are the only individual inhabiting the universe in that moment. This level of focus is so rare in our age of digital distraction that it feels like a superpower to those who receive it. When you listen with your whole being, you aren't just collecting data. You are providing the other person with a mirror that helps them understand themselves more clearly. This creates a feedback loop of intimacy where the more they talk, the more they feel connected to you, because you have become the vessel for their self-discovery. Imagine a romantic partner who remembers the tiny, insignificant detail you mentioned weeks ago, or a friend who asks a follow-up question about a passing comment you made about your childhood. These small acts of attentiveness signal that you value their inner world enough to map it out. It is through this meticulous mapping of another person's mind that you build a territory of shared meaning. You are signaling that they are worth the effort of your focus, and in return, they give you the keys to their heart. This is how you win the devotion of others, not by talking more about yourself, but by becoming the most profound listener they have ever encountered. You are not just hearing their words. You are feeling the frequency of their soul, and that is a connection that, once established, is nearly impossible for the brain to ignore or replace. A common mistake in the pursuit of connection is the belief that more effort equals more intimacy, leading many to fall into the trap of overfunctioning in their relationships. When you try too hard to be liked, when you are always the one reaching out, always the one suggesting plans, and always the one smoothing over every potential conflict, you inadvertently create an emotional imbalance that kills the natural spark of attraction. This over-effort is often perceived by the other person's subconscious as a signal of low value or a lack of self-respect, which can trigger a reflexive withdrawal. True connection requires a delicate emotional balance, a rhythm of give and take that allows space for the other person to step toward you. Think of it like a dance where one partner must move back for the other to move forward. If you are always lunging toward your partner, they have no choice but to keep backing away until they are out of the room. Connection thrives in the tension between pursuit and availability, and by holding back just enough of your own energy, you create a vacuum that the other person feels an instinctive need to fill. This is not about being cold or manipulative, but about honoring the psychological necessity of autonomy. When you allow someone the space to miss you, to wonder about you, and to contribute to the relationship, you are giving them the opportunity to invest in the bond. The more someone invests in you, the more they value you, because our brains are hardwired to protect what we have worked for. By maintaining your own emotional equilibrium, you signal that your presence is a gift that must be earned, which ironically makes the other person work harder to stay connected to you. It is a silent demonstration of self-worth that commands respect and deepens the attachment far more effectively than any desperate plea for attention ever could. Shared emotional experiences are the fuel that turns a casual acquaintance into a lifelong bond, acting as a shortcut through the slow process of building trust. When two people experience a moment of high intensity together, whether it is the thrill of a successful project, the adrenaline of a physical challenge, or the shared grief of a loss, their nervous systems become synchronized in a way that words cannot replicate. This is why teams that go through high-stress environments together often form bonds that are stronger than those between family members. They have shared a physiological reality that others can only imagine. To build deep connection, you should look for opportunities to step outside the mundane routines of polite conversation and engage in activities that evoke a genuine emotional response. In a workplace setting, This could be the late night push to meet a deadline where everyone is tired but unified in a common goal. In a friendship, it is the road trip where things go wrong and you have to find a way through it together. These moments create a we identity that supersedes the I, forging a collective memory that acts as a permanent anchor for the relationship. When you have survived something together, you no longer have to prove your loyalty. It is already written into the story of your lives. The most influential people are those who know how to curate these experiences, turning a simple meeting into an event or a standard dinner into an unforgettable conversation. They understand that we don't remember what people said, we remember the emotional peaks we hit while we were with them. By becoming the architect of these shared peaks, you ensure that your image is forever linked to the most vibrant and meaningful moments of the other person's life. Subtle behaviors, often performed unconsciously, play a massive role in creating deep attachment over a long period. These are the micro moments of connection that happen in the margins of life, such as the way you tilt your head when someone is speaking, the warmth in your voice when you say their name, or the brief, supportive touch on a shoulder during a difficult moment. These small cues are processed by the primitive parts of the brain that deal with safety and belonging, and they build a cumulative sense of intimacy that is far more powerful than any single grand gesture. We often focus on the big moments like birthdays or anniversaries, but the health of a relationship is actually determined by the thousands of tiny interactions that happen on an ordinary Tuesday. In psychological terms, these are called bids for connection, and the way you respond to them determines the future of the bond. If a friend points out a beautiful sunset and you look and acknowledge it, you have turned toward their bid, strengthening the connection. If you ignore them or stay focused on your phone, you have turned away, creating a small tear in the emotional fabric. Over years, these tiny choices accumulate into either a solid wall of trust or a chasm of resentment. To be a pro at winning hearts, you must become hyper-aware of these bids and make it your mission to turn toward them as often as possible. This consistent, quiet reliability creates a deep-seated feeling of being cared for that makes the other person feel safe enough to open their heart fully. Attachment is not a sudden event. It is a slow growth, like a vine winding its way around a trellis, and it is nourished by the small, invisible acts of attention that most people are too distracted to notice. The psychology of trust is rooted in the predictability and consistency of these small behaviors, rather than the unpredictability of big dramatic actions. We are often seduced by the idea of the heroic gesture, the person who flies across the world to save a relationship or the friend who lends a massive sum of money in a crisis. While these actions are commendable, they do not build the same level of foundational trust as the person who simply shows up when they say they will every single time. True reliability is a form of emotional integrity that tells the other person they can lower their guard because they know exactly what to expect from you. In a world where everyone is chasing the next high and everyone is distracted by the next shiny object, being a consistent presence is a revolutionary act of connection. It removes the background noise of anxiety from the relationship, allowing both people to focus on the joy of being together rather than the fear of being let down. This consistency creates a deep, quiet confidence in the bond that allows it to weather any storm. When you are consistent, you are essentially telling the other person that they are a priority in your life, not just when it is convenient for you, but as a standard rule of your existence. This is the ultimate form of validation, a silent testament to their worth that speaks louder than any poem or speech. By mastering the art of the small, consistent action, you build a fortress of trust that no amount of outside pressure can dismantle. You become the one constant in their ever-changing world, and that is a position of influence that is both profound and permanent. As we reach the end of this exploration into the depths of human connection, you should carry with you the realization that winning a heart is not about a performance, but about a presence. It is the realization that the most powerful things you can do to connect with another person are often the things that go unseen by the rest of the world. It is the silence you hold, the attention you give, the safety you provide, and the consistency you maintain. Connection is built in the quiet spaces between words, in the glances that say more than 1,000 sentences, and in the small, invisible moments where you choose to see and be seen. You are no longer chasing the spotlight or performing for the crowd. You are focused on the one person in front of you, building a bridge of understanding that can withstand the test of time. This is the true meaning of winning someone's heart, not as a trophy to be won, but as a sacred trust to be held. As you move forward, look for the small bids for connection in your own life and practice the art of turning toward them. Watch as the people around you begin to open up like flowers to the sun, drawn to the warmth of your genuine presence and the safety of your validation. You are becoming a master of the human bond, a person who understands that the strongest ties are those that are made of the smallest threads. The journey of connection is not a sprint toward a grand finale, but a slow, beautiful walk through the small moments that make a life worth living. You have the tools, you have the awareness, and now you have the heart to lead the way. Charisma is often spoken of as a divine spark or a genetic inheritance, a mystical quality that some possess while others are destined to live in the shadows of the more vibrant. However, when we strip away the romanticism and examine the raw mechanics of human interaction, we discover that charisma is a highly structured psychological pattern that can be decoded, practiced, and mastered. It is not about being the most exuberant person in the room or possessing an unnatural level of wit. It is a specific alignment of presence, power, and warmth that signals high evolutionary value to everyone in your vicinity. At its core, charisma is the ability to make the person you are speaking with feel as though they are the most important individual in the world, while simultaneously projecting an aura of total self-sufficiency. This creates a magnetic tension that people find irresistible. We are biologically programmed to seek out individuals who appear grounded and unaffected by the chaotic shifts of their environment, as these traits traditionally signaled leadership and survival capability. By understanding that charisma is a set of nonverbal cues, ranging from the stillness of your hands to the intentionality of your gaze, you move from being a spectator of social dynamics to becoming the architect of your own influence. The first step in this transformation is recognizing that your external energy is a direct reflection of your internal state. You cannot fake a magnetic presence if your mind is cluttered with the desperate need for approval. True charisma begins the moment you stop performing for the world and start inhabiting your own space with a level of certainty that requires no outside confirmation. It is a quiet authority that speaks far louder than any shout, and it is available to anyone willing to master the discipline of their own psychological output. The most potent communicator of confidence is not the words you choose, but the silent language of your physical presence and the tonal quality of your voice. We process social hierarchy through a series of rapid-fire subconscious assessments. often forming a definitive opinion of a person before they have even finished their first sentence. A charismatic individual understands that their posture is a constant broadcast of their internal status. They occupy space with a relaxed expansion, avoiding the protective, constricted movements that signal anxiety or submission. This physical openness is coupled with a vocal tone that is resonant, calm, and devoid of the upward inflection that turns a statement into a question. When you speak with a slight downward inflection at the end of your sentences, you communicate a level of certainty that demands respect without needing to ask for it. Furthermore, the strategic use of silence is perhaps the ultimate indicator of high-status confidence. While the average person feels a frantic need to fill every gap in conversation to avoid awkwardness, the charismatic individual uses silence as a tool of emphasis and a test of the other person's emotional stability. By allowing a pause to hang in the air, you demonstrate that you are comfortable with tension and that you do not fear the judgment of others. This level of emotional control acts as a gravitational force, drawing people in as they attempt to reconcile your stillness with their own internal noise. You are essentially setting the pace of the interaction, forcing the world to slow down to match your frequency. This is where true power resides, not in the speed of your reaction, but in the deliberate nature of your actions. Magnetic energy is frequently confused with extroversion, yet some of the most magnetic figures in history were individuals of few words and immense internal stability. This energy is a byproduct of being grounded, a psychological state where your sense of worth is anchored internally rather than being tethered to the shifting winds of external validation. When you are grounded, you are no longer a leaf in the wind, reacting to every slight or seeking every compliment. You are the mountain around which the weather changes. This stability creates a profound sense of safety for those around you, as humans are instinctively attracted to strength that does not need to boast. People with magnetic energy possess a radiant quality because they aren't trying to take anything from the interaction. They aren't looking for a win or a boost to their ego. Instead, they are simply present, offering a level of attention that is both intense and non-threatening. This lack of neediness is the ultimate aphrodisiac in social dynamics. It triggers a curiosity in others, making them wonder why you are so self-assured and what secrets you might hold. This energy is not something you do. It is something you are once you have purged the toxins of social anxiety and the habit of seeking permission to exist. When your internal world is solid, your external presence becomes an undeniable force that people naturally want to align themselves with. You don't have to chase the light when you have become the source of it. This shift from consumer to creator of energy is the fundamental transition of the charismatic mind, allowing you to influence the emotional climate of any room you enter by simply standing in your truth with unwavering composure. The behavioral psychology of presence is most clearly visible in the mastery of eye contact and the timing of one's responses. Eye contact is a direct channel to the nervous system, and the way you handle it can either forge a deep bond or create an instant sense of distrust. A charismatic individual practices what is known as soft focus, eye contact, a gaze that is steady and warm rather than piercing and predatory. By holding a person's eyes for a fraction of a second longer than is standard, you signal an interest that is both profound and rare, creating an immediate sense of intimacy. This must be paired with speech pacing that is deliberate and unhurried. Nervous energy often manifests as rapid speech, as though the speaker is afraid they will be interrupted if they don't finish their thought quickly. By contrast, a confident person speaks as if they have all the time in the world, trusting that what they have to say is valuable enough to be waited for. This control over time is a subtle but lethal display of status. It forces the listener to lean in, to listen more closely, and to respect the space you are taking up. Timing also extends to your reactions. The person who reacts instantly to a stimulus appears impulsive and reactive, while the person who takes a moment to process before responding appears thoughtful and in control. This 1-second delay in your social responses can completely change how you are perceived, transforming you from a person who is easily rattled into a person who is fundamentally unshakable. Mastering these micro-behaviors allows you to hack the social instincts of those around you, making your charisma feel like a natural force of nature rather than a calculated set of skills. One of the most common mistakes that kills attraction and destroys charisma is the habit of over-explaining or justifying one's actions and opinions. When you over-explain, you are essentially apologizing for your perspective, signaling to the other person that you do not believe your words carry enough weight on their own. This behavior is rooted in a deep-seated fear of being misunderstood or rejected, and it is a major leak of social power. Charismatic individuals understand that less is almost always more. They provide their thoughts with a lean efficiency that leaves room for the other person's imagination. By leaving things unsaid, you maintain a sense of mystery and force the other person to engage more deeply to uncover your meaning. Another charisma killer is the outward display of nervous energy, fidgeting, adjusting your clothes, or scanning the room for an exit. These movements are tells that your internal world is in disarray, and they immediately lower your perceived value in the eyes of others. To be truly magnetic, you must learn to be still. Stillness is a signal of high-level emotional regulation and a lack of threat. When you are still, you project a sense of dangerous calm, the kind of presence associated with predators and high-level leaders who don't need to move until it is time to act. Seeking approval is the third great enemy of influence. The moment you ask, "Does that make sense?" or look for a nod of agreement after you speak, you have handed over the power of the interaction to someone else. A pro at winning hearts never asks for permission to be heard. They assume their right to the floor and hold it with a grace that makes it impossible for others to look away. Consider the real-life examples of individuals who command a room without ever raising their voices. They are often the ones who stand slightly apart from the fray, observing with a calm smile, while others scramble for attention. Think of a seasoned diplomat or a high-level performer who enters a stage and waits for the applause to die down completely before speaking their first word. They don't rush the audience. They wait for the audience to come to them. In social settings, these are the people who listen more than they talk, but when they do speak, everyone leans in. They don't use filler words like or like, and they aren't afraid of a lull in the conversation. They navigate the social landscape with a sense of pre-selection, behaving as if they are already liked and respected by everyone present. This assumption of positive intent is a self-fulfilling prophecy because they act as though they are high value. Others naturally treat them as such. They are also masters of the inclusive gaze, making everyone in a group feel acknowledged without being overwhelmed. This type of charisma is not a performance for the ego. It is a service to the social environment. By providing a stable, confident, and warm presence, they become the anchor for the entire group's experience. People leave an interaction with such an individual not thinking about how great the person was, but about how great they themselves felt while in that person's presence. This is the highest form of magnetic energy, the ability to elevate the state of everyone around you while remaining perfectly centered in your own power. It is a subtle, sophisticated game played at the level of the subconscious, where the winner is the one who remains the most composed. As we dive deeper into the mechanics of this energy, we must confront the reality. As we dive deeper into the mechanics of this energy, we must confront the reality that charisma is ultimately about control over self, not control over others. The desire to control or manipulate the reactions of others is a low-frequency motivation that is easily detected and resisted by the human brain. True influence is a secondary effect of self-mastery. When you have total control over your own emotions, your own movements, and your own speech, you become a fixed point in a world of variables. People are naturally drawn to fixed points because they provide a sense of orientation and certainty. The person who cannot be easily influenced is the most influential person in the room. This means that to increase your charisma, you must work on your internal architecture. You must build a version of yourself that you truly respect, one that can withstand the pressure of silence, the sting of a disagreement, and the temptation to show off. When you respect yourself to that degree, you no longer need to try to be charismatic. The charisma emanates from you as a natural consequence of your integrity and self-possession. You are no longer performing a character. You are projecting a reality. This realization is liberating because it means that your social success is entirely within your own hands. You don't need the world to change, you don't need people to like you, and you don't need to be born with a silver tongue. You only need the discipline to govern your own mind and body with the precision of a master. The world will inevitably follow the lead of the transition to becoming a charismatic force is a journey toward the center of your own being. It is the process of shedding the layers of social conditioning that told you to be small, to be quiet, and to seek permission. It is the reclamation of your natural right to occupy space and to influence the world with your presence. As you move forward from this chapter, start to notice the moments where you lose your center, the times you speak too fast, the times you look away first, and the times you seek validation in the eyes of a stranger. These are your opportunities for growth. Each time you choose stillness over fidgeting, silence over over-explaining, and internal stability over external approval, you are strengthening the muscles of your magnetic energy. You are becoming a person of weight and substance, a person whose heart is won not through tricks, but through the undeniable power of an authentic, grounded existence. Charisma is the outward expression of an inner victory, and that victory is won in the small, private moments where you choose to be the master of your own soul. The world is waiting for leaders who are grounded, confident, and warm. By mastering yourself, you become the pro who can win any heart, because you have already won your own. This is the end of your apprenticeship in the art of presence. The spotlight is moving toward you, not because you asked for it, but because your energy is now too powerful to be ignored. Step into your power, hold the gaze of the world, and let them see the clarity of a person who is finally, truly, in command of their own destiny. True persuasion is rarely a battle of logic or a series of forceful arguments designed to bend another person's will. Rather, it is the sophisticated art of emotional alignment. To win a heart or change a mind, you must first move into the same emotional frequency as your subject, creating a shared reality where your suggestions feel like their own original thoughts. Most people fail at persuasion because they approach it as a transaction or a conquest, triggering the target's natural defenses and psychological reactance. When you push, the human instinct is to push back. However, when you align, the resistance evaporates. This chapter explores the hidden mechanics of how we capture attention and hold it hostage through the strategic use of curiosity gaps and emotional tension. The human brain is a completion machine. It cannot tolerate an unfinished story or an unanswered question. By revealing just enough information to spark interest while withholding the resolution, you create a psychological vacuum that the other person feels a physical compulsion to fill. This is why storytelling is the ultimate vessel for influence. It bypasses the critical filters of the logical mind and speaks directly to the emotional core, where decisions are actually made. When you master the art of emotional alignment, you stop being a salesperson of ideas and start being a guide, leading others toward a destination they believe they chose for themselves. It is a subtle, invisible shift from external pressure to internal desire, and it is the foundation upon which all great social empires are built. Understanding this allows you to navigate the most complex human interactions with a sense of ease, knowing that the key to moving a mountain is simply finding the right emotional lever to pull. To command the attention of others, you must understand the deep psychological principles of reciprocity, scarcity, and authority, not as academic concepts, but as the raw materials of human connection. Reciprocity is the ancient social debt we feel when someone does something for us. It is a primal urge to balance the scales. When you give value, attention, or validation without an immediate demand for return, you create a subtle psychological tether that pulls the other person toward you. Scarcity, on the other hand, is the engine of value. We do not crave what is abundant. We obsess over what is rare or disappearing. By making your time, your approval, or your insights a scarce resource, you instinctively raise your status in the eyes of others. Authority is not about a title, but about the projection of competence and the calm assumption of leadership. People are looking for someone who knows the way, and they will naturally surrender their attention to the individual who moves with the most certainty. In a natural human context, these principles work together to create a magnetic field of influence. Imagine a conversation where you offer a profound insight, then lean back and allow the silence to create a scarcity of your presence. You aren't forcing the interaction. You are creating a world where the other person feels a deep, subconscious need to engage with you. This is the hallmark of a pro. They don't hunt for attention. They create an environment where attention has nowhere else to go. You are essentially hacking the brain's internal reward system, making your presence a prize that they are eager to win, all while maintaining a posture of effortless generosity. Emotional control is the invisible shield that protects your influence from the corrosive effects of impulsive reactions. The moment you lose your temper, show desperation, or react defensively to a slight, you have handed the keys of the interaction over to the other person. High-level influence requires a degree of emotional stoicism that allows you to observe a situation objectively while others are drowning in their own feelings. When you remain calm in the face of pressure, you signal a level of internal stability that is incredibly rare and highly attractive. This control allows you to use emotional framing rather than logic to guide a conversation. Logic is cold and easily debated, but a frame is an emotional perspective that dictates how information is perceived. For example, if a negotiation is framed as a collaborative rescue mission rather than a zero-sum game, the entire tone of the interaction shifts from combat to cooperation. Your ability to maintain your frame depends entirely on your emotional control. If you can be rattled, your frame can be broken. Most people are governed by their immediate emotional responses, acting like barometers that change with the weather. A pro, however, is a thermostat. They set the temperature of the room and hold it there through sheer internal discipline. This creates a powerful vacuum of leadership. When everyone else is reactive, the person who remains unresponsive to provocation becomes the natural center of gravity. This is not about being a robot. It is about having a reservoir of calm that is so deep that the surface remains still even when the winds are howling. In subtle persuasion, the tone of your voice and the timing of your delivery carry far more weight than the actual words you speak. You can say the most brilliant thing in the world, but if your tone is high-pitched and fast, it will be heard as a plea rather than a command. Conversely, a simple statement delivered with a slow, resonant pace and a downward inflection can move people to action with the force of a tidal wave. Timing is the art of knowing when to speak and, more importantly, when to stop. A well-timed pause after a persuasive point allows the emotional weight of your words to sink in, forcing the listener to confront the feeling you've created. This is where real change happens. Think of a conversation where someone asks for a favor. If they ask with an air of entitlement or nervous pressure, your instinct is to refuse. But if they frame the request within a story of shared values and deliver it with a tone of quiet confidence, you find yourself wanting to say yes before they even finish the sentence. This is the power of subtext. While the conscious mind is busy processing the words, the subconscious is being massaged by the rhythm, the warmth, and the certainty of the delivery. Pros understand that they are performing a psychological symphony, using the nuances of their voice to trigger specific emotional responses in their audience. They don't just speak, they vibrate at a frequency that demands a response. By mastering these nonverbal elements, you gain the ability to influence others on a level they cannot even perceive, making your presence felt long after you have left the room. People are not moved to deep attachment or significant action by logical arguments. They are moved by the way a person makes them feel about the future and themselves. This is the secret of emotional framing. Logic is the tool we use to justify a decision after we have already made it with our hearts. To truly win someone over, you must paint a picture that resonates with their deepest desires or solves their most persistent fears. When you frame a situation in a way that offers a path to status, safety, or belonging, you are speaking the language of the soul. Logic might tell a person that a certain path is risky, but emotional influence can make that risk feel like an adventure that is essential to their identity. This is why charismatic leaders often seem to defy common sense. They aren't appealing to the brain's calculator. They are appealing to its imagination. In friendships and romantic dynamics, this manifests as the person who makes you feel like the best version of yourself. Their influence isn't based on what they do for you, but on the internal emotional state they trigger in you. You become obsessed with them because they have become the key to your own happiness. This is the most potent form of persuasion because it is self-sustaining. Once you have successfully framed yourself as a source of positive emotional intensity, the other person will use their own logic to defend their attachment to you. You don't have to convince them of your value. They will convince themselves because they cannot imagine their world without the feeling you provide. Consider a social interaction where someone is being difficult or confrontational. The amateur tries to use logic to explain why the other person is wrong, which only fuels the fire. The pro, however, uses emotional control to de-escalate the tension and then reframes the conflict. They might say, "I can see you're passionate about this, and that's exactly why I value your input." By validating the emotion and reframing the anger as passion, they have immediately aligned themselves with the other person. The conflict is no longer two people fighting. It is two passionate people working toward a solution. This is persuasion without force. It is the ability to take the energy directed at you and redirect it toward your own goals. This requires an immense amount of self-awareness and the ability to detach your ego from the interaction. Most people are so concerned with being right that they lose the opportunity to be influential. But when you prioritize the emotional outcome over the logical victory, you gain a level of power that is almost supernatural. You begin to see every conversation as a series of emotional gates. Once you unlock the right gate, the person will walk through it willingly. This subtle maneuvering is happening all around us, in boardrooms, in living rooms, and on street corners. The people who are winning hearts are the ones who have mastered the silent mechanics of the human heart, moving through the world with a strategic kindness that is as effective as it is invisible. The strongest and most enduring influence always comes from a place of calm emotional control. There is a specific kind of magnetism that emanates from a person who cannot be shaken, a person who holds their center regardless of the chaos surrounding them. This is the ultimate signal of authority and power. When you speak from this place of stillness, your words have a density and a weight that demands attention. You don't need to use high-pressure tactics or manipulation because your very presence is persuasive. People are drawn to those who possess what they lack. And in a world of constant distraction and emotional volatility, a calm, controlled mind is the rarest and most valuable asset. This is the realization that separates the masters from the students. You do not gain influence by controlling others. You gain it by becoming the master of yourself. When you are truly in control of your emotions, your energy becomes a stabilizing force that others want to lean on. They will seek your approval, follow your lead, and give you their hearts simply because being near you makes them feel more secure in themselves. This is the end of the journey into the secrets of persuasion. It is not a set of tricks to be played on the unsuspecting, but a level of personal development that makes you a natural leader of souls. Your influence is not something you do. It is an extension of who you have become. As you step out into the world with these insights, you must carry the responsibility of your own influence with a sense of purpose. You have the tools to capture attention, to align emotions, and to frame the reality of those around you. But the true power lies in the integrity behind your actions. People can sense the difference between a person using these techniques for selfish gain and a person who genuinely wants to create a connection. When your emotional control is grounded in a sincere desire to understand and elevate others, your influence becomes truly limitless. You are no longer just winning hearts. You are building a legacy of meaningful connections. The world is a complex web of emotional signals, and you are now a master weaver, capable of creating beauty and harmony where there was once only noise and conflict. The people you meet will feel the shift in your energy, the weight of your words, and the safety of your presence. They won't know exactly why they feel so drawn to you, and they don't need to. They will simply know that being in your world makes their own world feel brighter and more coherent. This is the ultimate victory of the pro, to move through the life of another person and leave it better than you found it, while quietly holding the strings of an obsession that they will cherish forever. Your transformation is complete, The master of hearts is no longer a student of the game, but the one who defines how it is played. The transition from being merely noticed to becoming a permanent resident of someone's psyche is a journey into the architecture of human memory and the science of psychological imprinting. We often believe that we are remembered for our achievements, our physical beauty, or the cleverness of our speech. But these are transient details that the brain eventually filters out to make room for new data. What the subconscious mind never discards is the emotional impact an individual leaves behind, the visceral feeling that lingers in the chest long after the front door has closed. To become impossible to forget, you must understand that memory is not a recording device. It is an emotional filter that prioritizes peaks and valleys over the flat plains of the everyday. We remember the people who moved our internal needle, those who shifted our state from comfort to curiosity or from safety to excitement. This process of identity association occurs when your presence becomes inextricably linked to a specific emotional state within another person. When they think of you, they aren't just recalling a face, they are re-experiencing a feeling. This is the foundation of becoming a legend in the personal history of others. You are not a collection of facts, you are a frequency. To master this, you must stop trying to be memorable through performance and start focusing on the emotional residue you leave in every interaction. The most unforgettable individuals are those who understand that every word spoken is a brushstroke on the canvas of another person's nervous system, creating a masterpiece of presence that remains vivid long after the colors of the day have faded into the gray of the past. The mechanics of lasting impressions are built upon the concept of emotional peaks, those concentrated moments of intensity that stand out like mountains against the horizon of a mundane life. Psychologists have long noted that human beings judge an experience not by its average, but by its most intense point and its conclusion. To be unforgettable, you must be the architect of these peaks, knowing exactly when to inject a moment of profound vulnerability, unexpected wit, or intense focus. It is the contrast that creates the imprint. If you are consistently pleasant, you are eventually forgotten because the brain thrives on novelty and deviation. However, when you balance that consistency with a calculated unpredictability, a sudden depth of conversation in a shallow room, or a moment of unwavering silence in a chaotic debate, you create a psychological hook that the memory cannot shake. This is the intermittent reinforcement of personality, where the observer is kept in a state of perpetual engagement because they can never fully map your boundaries. You become a mystery that requires revisiting, a story that is never quite finished. People who leave an emotional residue are those who don't just participate in a conversation. They alter the atmospheric pressure of the room. They leave others feeling slightly more alive, slightly more seen, or perhaps even slightly more unsettled than they were before. It is this subtle disruption of the status quo that ensures your name is the one that surfaces in the quiet hours of the night. You are not just a person they met. You are an event that happened to them, a milestone in their emotional timeline that they will use to measure everyone who comes after you. Identity association is the most sophisticated form of influence, where your very image becomes a trigger for a specific internal transformation in others. Some people are remembered as the safe harbor, the person whose memory brings an immediate sense of calm and grounding. Others are the catalyst, whose name alone sparks a feeling of ambition and untapped potential. The key to becoming unforgettable is to choose which emotional territory you wish to occupy in the minds of others, and then to defend that territory with relentless consistency. This is not about being a one-dimensional character, but about having a core emotional signature that remains unshakable. When you have emotional depth, you aren't just reacting to the world. You are inviting others into a world you have already built. This depth is communicated through the way you hold space for the complexity of others, acknowledging their shadows as much as their light. When someone feels that you have seen a part of them that they usually keep hidden, they will attach themselves to you with a ferocity that defies logic. You become a part of their identity because you have become the witness to their truth. This is the difference between a person who is liked and a person who is essential. Liked people are easily replaced by the next charismatic stranger, but essential people are woven into the fabric of the self. To achieve this, you must move beyond the desire for approval and into the realm of profound presence. It is the weight of your presence, the feeling that you are truly, undeniably there, that creates the gravity from which others cannot escape. Consider the people in your own life who have remained unforgettable despite the passage of years and the distance of miles. They were likely not the ones who tried the hardest to impress you, but the ones who made you feel something you hadn't felt before. Perhaps it was the way they listened with a focus so intense it felt like a physical embrace, or the way they challenged your assumptions with a gentle but firm authority. These individuals didn't perform charisma, they inhabited it. They were grounded in their own reality, and their energy was so stable that it acted as an anchor for your own. When they left a vacuum, a sense that the world was slightly less vibrant without their perspective. This is the emotional residue of the master. It is the feeling of a conversation that wasn't quite finished, of a connection that had layers yet to be explored. You become unforgettable when you leave people wanting more of the version of themselves they found while they were with you. It is a selfless form of power where your influence is measured by the growth and emotional expansion of those you touch. By focusing on the impact you have on the internal state of others, you bypass the fickle nature of the conscious mind and embed yourself in the primitive, feeling parts of the brain. You aren't just a memory. You are a haunting, a beautiful and persistent reminder that life can be deeper, more intense, and more meaningful than it appears on the surface. Consistency and unpredictability may seem like opposing forces, but in the hands of a pro, they are the twin engines of magnetic energy. Consistency builds the foundation of trust and safety, ensuring that you are seen as a reliable and high-value individual. Unpredictability, however, provides the spark of intrigue that prevents that safety from turning into boredom. The balance between these two is what creates a lasting impression. Think of it as the rhythm of a masterfully composed song. The steady beat keeps you grounded, but it is the unexpected melody that gets stuck in your head for days. When you are consistent in your values and your presence, but unpredictable in your insights and your reactions, you create a psychological profile that is both comforting and fascinating. This prevents people from filing you away under a simple label. You become a multifaceted individual who cannot be easily categorized, which forces the brain to keep thinking about you in an attempt to solve the puzzle. This mental looping is the essence of obsession and the gateway to being unforgettable. You aren't just a face in the crowd. You are a recurring theme in the narrative of their lives. Each interaction becomes a new chapter, adding complexity and depth to the image they hold of you. By the time they realize how much space you occupy in their thoughts, it is already too late to evict you. You have become a part of their mental landscape, as permanent as the stars, and as influential as the moon. The idea that being unforgettable is about performance is a trap that leads to exhaustion and superficiality. When you perform, you are operating from a place of lack, trying to gain something from the audience to fill an internal void. This neediness is always detectable, and it acts as a repellent to deep, authentic connection. True, unforgettable presence comes from a place of overflow, a state where you are so grounded in your own value and emotional control that you have a surplus of energy to give to others. This is the shift from "how do I look" to "how can I see you?" When you move through the world with this orientation, your presence becomes a gift rather than a demand. People remember you because you provided them with a rare commodity: genuine, undistracted attention and emotional safety. In a world that is increasingly loud and fractured, the person who can provide a moment of stillness and deep resonance is a miracle. You don't need to do anything dramatic to be remembered. You only need to be fully present. This presence is cinematic in its intensity, turning a simple coffee shop meeting into a scene that will be replayed in the mind for decades. It is the quality of the light you bring to an interaction that determines how long the shadow of your memory will linger. When you stop trying to be unforgettable, you finally become so, because you have replaced the noise of your ego with the powerful, quiet signal of your true self. As this audiobook draws to a close, it is time to reflect on the invisible wake you leave behind as you move through the ocean of human life. Every person you encounter, from the stranger in the elevator to the love of your life, is carrying a piece of you away with them. What is that piece made of? Is it a shard of anxiety, a blur of indifference, or a spark of inspiration? To win everyone's heart like a pro is not about winning a game. It is about taking responsibility for the emotional climate you create. You have been given the tools to understand the dopamine responses, the mirror neurons, and the curiosity gaps that govern our social existence. But these tools are merely the mechanics. The soul of influence is the intention behind it. When you use your power to see others, to validate them, and to move them toward a higher state of being, you create a bond that transcends the physical world. You become a person who is not just loved, but revered, a person whose memory acts as a guiding light for others. The realization you must carry forward is that your influence is happening right now, in this moment, and in every moment that follows. You are currently writing the memories that others will hold of you 10 years from today. The impression you leave is your legacy, and it is built one small, invisible interaction at a time. You stand now at the threshold of a new way of being, equipped with the knowledge that attraction is a system and connection is a craft. The world is no longer a place of random social accidents, but a garden of potential where you are the master architect. As you close this chapter and step back into the flow of your life, do so with a newfound sense of awe for the power you hold. You have the ability to make a heart beat faster, to calm a troubled mind, and to become a permanent part of someone's soul. This is a sacred weight to carry. Use it to build bridges where there were walls, to bring light where there was darkness, and to live with a level of presence that makes every second count. The people you meet are waiting for someone to see them, to challenge them, and to remember them. By becoming that person, you ensure that you will never be forgotten. The echoes of your influence will ripple through the lives of others long after you are gone, a silent testament to a life lived with mastery and heart. This is your life, and these are your people. Go forth and win their hearts, not for the sake of the win, but for the beauty of the connection. The book is ending, but your story, the real story, is only just beginning. Make it a masterpiece,